Brian watching Free Speech TV on the web in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. Hey, Brian, what's up? Brian?
Hello?
Hey, you're on the air.
Yeah, how you doing? I know one way we can lower health care. Get rid of the 80 million illegals in this country that the government's paying health care on. All the farmers have illegals working for them, and we're paying for their health care. That's why we had a war with the South, because they had slave labor. Those farmers don't need illegals working for them. If they can't afford to farm, let somebody else do it.
You know how this came about, Brian? Was
all these factories out in Texas and Massachusetts here. You can't get a job there unless you're Spanish illegal. That's not right.
I don't disagree, Brian. I think your numbers are off. I don't think there's 80 million undocumented people in the United States. But nonetheless, if you want to know where this problem came from, if you want to define it as a problem, frankly, I think in some ways it is Ronald Reagan. Reagan in 1986 granted amnesty to 5 million people who were in this country without documentation, and then stopped enforcing the law against rich white employers who hired people without documentation. Prior to 1986, the average migration numbers in the United States were a little less than 1 million people would come from Mexico into the United States, or from south of the border, let's say, into the United States every year around picking season, summer, fall. And when winter came, around 1 million people would go back to Mexico. They'd go back south. When Reagan stopped, and the reason why was because there was basically a carve out in the you can't hire an undocumented worker provision for the farmers in California and Oregon and Washington State, by and large. And so people came and they picked vegetables and then they went home. We actually even had a program for this back in the 50s and 60s. It was called the Bracero program, where we issued them like temporary identity cards when they came in. It didn't work out so well, so they just went back to the wink and the nod system. But outside of agriculture, if an employer hired somebody who did not have documentation, who did not have a green card, the right to work in this country, that employer could go to jail. That employer would face fines. That employer was facing the possibility that their place of business would be shut down. And therefore, meatpacking plants all across this country were paying $30, $40 an hour. They were unionized. There was good work. Construction sites all across this country were paying $30, $40, $50 an hour for good laborers, roofers and electricians and whatnot. And now all those wages have collapsed because Reagan said we're no longer going to put the wealthy white corporate employers in jail. We're only going to put the, quote, illegal aliens in jail, which meant that those employers that you're talking about, Brian, in Fitchburg or wherever it may be, those employers are now able to hire people who are here without documentation and know that they're not going to go to jail because nobody has changed the rules since Reagan. I mean, we've just been maintaining it all this time. If you want to see people who are only here for their own economic advantage, who shouldn't be here, go back home. All you have to do is start putting employers in jail, put some rich white guys in jail. But I see no appetite for that in the Republican Party. They absolutely are opposed to that. They want to maintain the Reagan status quo because, as you point out, it is cheap labor. And comprehensive immigration reform, by the way, as proposed by the Obama administration, would go back to the employer enforcement. It would reverse that Reagan doctrine and thus prevent the problem from happening all over again. But nobody seems to want to talk about that part of it.